You sit there and get defensive and cross your arms when somebody comes along and asks you to do something that's outside of your normal remit, then you're going to struggle. To me, you need to get into this habit of being able to learn, unlearn, and relearn.
Hey there, I'm Goli Kalkaran, and this is Lessons from a Quitter, where we believe that it's never too late to start over. No matter how much time or money you've spent getting to where you are, if ultimately you are not happy, then it's time to get out. If you're feeling stuck and you feel like there's gotta be more, there's gotta be a way to feel fulfilled and excited about what you do, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I will sit down with an inspiring guest who quit their professional career in order to forge their own path and create a life that they love. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Lessons from a Quitter. I am so excited to have you here, and you are in for a treat with today's episode. I got to talk to Julian Mather, and he just dropped so much insight. But one of the things that we talk a lot about, and I wanted to kind of talk a little bit more in depth before we get into it, is this concept of being 100% responsible for your life and taking agency for your entire life. And I think a lot of times we assume that we are. Like, I never saw myself as playing a victim. I never thought that I wasn't taking responsibility for my life. And so when I would hear people say that, you know, sometimes I would even push back for other people. And I would say, well, you don't know the circumstances of other people's lives. And I don't think I really understood the concept that while, yes, there are tons of external circumstances that we have no control over, we 100% are responsible for how we react and how we act and the steps we take. While, you know, maybe you feel justified in going one way or another, that's fine. It's just that you have to understand that you are making a choice with everything and that you are responsible for those choices. And really taking that responsibility just frees you up. I mean, it opens your life up. It shows you that there are a million different things that you can do, and it's all in your hands, and it's actually really freeing. What's scary about it is obviously, like, it's in your hands, which means you're the one that has to take the steps. And so the reason I wanted to talk about it, though, is a lot of times we don't realize we're not taking responsibility. So from my own personal situation, at my last job, there were things that were outside of my control that made me very unhappy in that position. And there were a lot of things that I didn't like. Now, if I had looked back, I would realize that I have 100% responsibility for my own happiness. So I either have to change my attitude with where I work and try to make it into a place that I'm happy, or if I can't, then I have to leave. And that is not only my responsibility, but that's my decision. I can do that. But instead, what I did was spend a number of years going into work, complaining the entire time, complaining with my coworkers, making every issue even bigger than it was, making myself more miserable, and then going home and complaining to my husband and feeling utterly stuck and really miserable and kind of like this level of despair because I thought there was no way out and that this is just what I have to deal with forever. And I kept thinking, like, how am I going to do this forever? And I realize now how ridiculous that is and how ridiculous I was, because I could have left literally any day. I could have done any other job. I could have found another legal job. I could have found non-legal jobs. But because of all of these identity things and just my own limiting beliefs, I thought that I was stuck there. And so while you're listening to this and you're listening to Julian, I would welcome you to really take stock in where are situations where you truly have no choice and where are situations where you do have a choice, but you're choosing to stay. Because once you decide that you're choosing, then you can decide how to deal with that. Like, maybe you figure out ways to set boundaries. Maybe you figure out ways to deal with your mental health outside of that arena so that when you're in that arena, it doesn't affect you as much. I was just watching another TED Talk that I sent to my newsletter a couple weeks ago, And the psychologist in it was talking about how they have found that working on problems, like talking about a problem without finding steps to solve it, actually makes the problem worse. And it cements the problem, and it makes us victims in our problems, and it keeps us in this loop of the problem. And that problem becomes bigger. And I think that makes sense when you think about it objectively, but a lot of times we don't realize that we are stuck in these loops of our problems. And so if you find yourself complaining about the same thing every day, or if you find yourself that there's something that is making you deeply unhappy, I welcome you to really think about how much agency you have to change that. Either your thoughts around it or act literally the thing, like change the actions, change your job, change your relationships, whatever that might be. And so keep that in mind as you're listening, because Julian harps on that a lot. And I think it's something that we sometimes become defensive of and either think, oh, I take responsibility, when we don't really take responsibility in all areas. Or we like to kind of push back and think, oh, well, you don't know my situation. And that's true. We don't know your situation, and everyone's situation is different. But for the most part, we all have a lot more choice than we like to believe. So with that, let's jump into this wonderful episode with Julian Mathers. Julian's resume is the most incredible thing, and he's one of the rare people that has had multiple career changes, and his story and his outlook and the way he approaches his life is just so amazing. I'm so excited to have him on. So he started out failing out of high school. He was always a rebel and a truant, and he took that failure to decide that his education was in his own hands, and he was going to be a lifelong learner, and he was going to teach himself. He went out of high school to the Army, and he was an Army sniper for a number of years before he started a 25-year career as a photojournalist, TV cameraman, globetrotting the world, and documenting incredible stories of people doing incredible things. And what's amazing about his story, and we'll get into, is that he was at the top of his career and he loved his job, and yet he felt a calling to do something more. And so he walked away at the age of 48, where most people who have a secure job that they're good at would never even think about starting over. But we will talk about how he left, how he started over, and how the first thing that he tried after that failed. And we don't talk about that enough, that like just because you take that one step and it doesn't work doesn't mean that you're not going to work as a business person or whatever it is you want to do. He went on to become a wildly successful children's entertainer. He was a magician for a number of years. He did thousands of shows, and he started a YouTube channel that garnered over 130,000 subscribers and over 30 million views. He began teaching other people how to be in the kids' entertainment space. He created a business from that and then recently sold it. And he has now once again reinvented himself, and he is now teaching businesses how to use video, since video is everywhere, to leverage their sales and marketing. Honestly, his insight on just reinvention and starting over and change is so incredible. And I will stop blabbering on so we can jump in and talk to Julian. Hi, Julian. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I am so excited to have you. And your journey is such an interesting one, and you have so many different career moves. So we will have to jump kind of through a couple of them. But I'm so excited to hear about kind of the mindset and the things that you've gone through making all of these reinventions and transformations. So starting back a little bit, before your main career, which was as a photojournalist, you started out your career in the Army, correct?
Yeah, I was an Army sniper, and the reason I was an Army sniper was I did really well at school, if you don't count learning. And so my whole ambition in my final years of school was to be Starsky, out of Starsky and Hutch, the TV cop show. And I became a chronic truant at school, had to re-educate myself the way that I wanted. But what I ended up doing was going to the state library And I got every book on photography, every book on photojournalism that I could read. And I read it and I read it again. And then I read between the lines. And, the secrets are always quite often written between the lines. And I worked out that photojournalism was not going to happen in my home city of Brisbane in Australia, where I live. And I realized I had to get out and see the world. So I was looking for a way out, and I was walking down the street and I saw a bus shelter, and on the side of a bus shelter was an army recruiting poster. And these soldiers walking through a pine forest. Now, in Australia, we have eucalypt forests. So pine forest seemed exotic, and I thought, that's the world I need to go. And so based upon that, that was my whole motivation for joining the army. So I went in and I said, do you need photojournalists? And they said, oh, certainly we do. Sign here. So I signed here, and that's when the yelling started. And it went on for quite a while, and I realized that I'd been duped. And yeah, and when I was in there, they put me in the infantry. And look, I learned a lot about myself, but I also realized that I was working for a whole lot of people who I didn't really respect. And so I looked within the army where I could go that I could be a bit more independent, and being a sniper seemed appealing. So there was a lot of hoops to jump through, but I ended up doing that. And, I learned a lot out of that. And they give us this funny little thing. They give us a little mirror, like a little polished steel mirror. And you'd use it for many things. So you start every day with it. You'd go, mirror, mirror, in the bush, who's the most handsome bloke in this bush? You are Julian, without a doubt. Thank you, mirror. Roger, out. And that's like, it gets lonely out there, so you've got to start the day. And then they'd say, if you've got any problems, ask the man in the mirror. He's the one who's going to sort them for you. And it's where I first started to really learn about personal responsibility. And I learned that it was my responsibility to choose the career and the direction I wanted that to go in. And I wasn't happy being an army sniper. I mean, I learned a lot, but it was not my future looking through a narrow view on the world. I wanted that wider view that you got with a wide angle lens, through photojournalism. And so I just had to learn what I needed to do to get that. And so I literally went back to the library, and I got out every book on photography and movie making. I started making my own little movies against the rules in the army. You weren't supposed to. And when I was lying and looking through a sniper scope, I actually realized it was just like the lens of a camera. So I started to make these little imaginary films, like just lying there waiting, and I do this filmmaking in my head. And that's essentially how I got my knowledge to then when I got out of the army to make the transition into TV.
There's so many incredible things about that. One of the things that I'm wondering is that most young kids at that age, especially if they didn't do well in school and, don't go kind of the traditional route, and are maybe living in a place where you don't think that, photojournalism or movies aren't a big industry. I think a lot of times we stop ourselves. And so we think like, who am I to, I didn't get good grades, or I didn't do that. I can't be this. So like, what do you think it was about you at the time that you thought, I can teach myself this stuff through books at the library, and I'm just going to figure out a way to become this dream job that I have?
When this was happening, so this was back in the late 1970s, to give you an idea of how old I am. At the same time, on the other side of the planet, on the other side of the Pacific in the USA, there was a writer, and his name was Alvin Toffler. And he was a writer and a futurist, and he wrote something that was spot on, so ahead of his time. He wrote, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write. It'll be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I was unwittingly living that back there. I was getting into this mindset of always unlearning and relearning. And I was starting my journey as a lifelong learner. And adopting that mindset is critical. I mean, I think it is the essential 21st century career skill. Whether you're leaving school or whether you're 40 or 50 years old, we're all going to work longer. So having this attitude, and you'll know if you don't have it. If you're at school or you're in your workplace and you asked to do something, you say, well, that's not part of my job description. If you want me to do that, you're going to have to teach me to do that. If you're saying that, if you sit there and get defensive and cross your arms when somebody comes along and asks you to do something that's outside of your normal remit, then you're going to struggle. And then to me, you need to get into this habit of being able to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because here's the thing. Knowledge is changing and the way that we use knowledge is changing. So the traditional three-phase life is over. That idea that you get an education and you get a job and you retire, that's gone. And so we all know now we're into this, multi-phase jobs where I don't know how many we'll have, but it's going to be a whole heap more. So this idea that you used to be able to go to school and go to university and get this reservoir of knowledge, it was almost like a lake. And you've got this big lake of knowledge and you can go and dip into that lake when you needed it. Well, that's changed. Knowledge is now like a river. Knowledge is now like this constant flow of new information that comes along, and you can't store it. You don't need to store it. You just dip in and out. It's like doing a Google search when you need it, because the half-life of knowledge is commonly said it's about 5 years. And what that means is half of what you learn now for your work, you're going to have to relearn in 5 years' time. And so it's this constant learn, unlearn, and relearn. And so if you're struggling with this, you've got to find ways that you can get in and start a new process in your head about your relationship with gaining new knowledge.
Oh my God, I love that. I think it's 100% true. And obviously it's all around us. And yet so many of us are still so resistant to it. Like, even though we see that the traditional way of careers and business has changed. Nobody stays in a career for 30 years and retires with a pension. It doesn't work like that anymore. Yet I think so many of us are kind of going into this kicking and screaming, wanting to hold on to like what was safe or what we had. And I think the sooner, like what you were just saying, the sooner you accept it, the more opportunity just opens up to you.
Well, this comes back to what I learned when I was an Army sniper. It's about accepting responsibility. This is no one else's responsibility but yours. There is no change can come in your life until you have accepted that you have to make a decision in your head. And once you make that decision and accept, well, listen, I can sit back and cross my arms and just wait and hope and cross my fingers that it's all going to work out, or I can start taking on that mantle right now and go, right, it's going to start with me. And this is, I don't want to sound like a tosser here, but it is just simply true. No change is going to happen. That's unless, there's external. There's always external change. Of course, a big tsunami can just come and wash across you. You can't stop that. But the only option you have is internal change. And that starts with you, and it's accepting responsibility is the first step.
Oh my God, absolutely. We talk a lot about that on the podcast, and I think it's amazing. A lot of people don't even realize that they're not taking responsibility. And I think as the sooner you can really realize how much agency you have over your life and how much you can change if you wanted. It's a scary thought, right? Because then you have to take the action. Then you're the one that has to take the responsibility. But it really opens you up to a life that you actually want.
Yeah, look, the bottom line is if you don't spend time planning the life you want, you're going to spend a lot of time living the life you don't want.
Oh my goodness, yes, 100%. So you leave the Army, you become a photojournalist, and you worked as a photojournalist for a couple decades, right?
25 years or so, short amount of time. Yeah. And I ended up getting into television, and because when I left school, I wanted to be a still photographer, but it was really that time in the Army looking through the sniper scopes and playing with video, the idea of video, that got me into going, no, actually I want to do moving pictures, and that's how I, drifted towards wanting to be in television. And it was fantastic. But the truth is, when I got in there, I got in on this amazing apprenticeship scheme that with the ABC. Now, that's not the American ABC, it's the Australian ABC, which is the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, which is to give people, it's like the BBC. People know the BBC, and it's a government-funded network. And so I got into this amazing apprenticeship scheme, and it taught me everything about TV and radio and film and video and editing. And they even, I mean, get this, we even had symphony orchestras.
Oh, my goodness.
And they would put us with a symphony orchestra and teach us how to read music scores. So if ever one day we wanted to do a television broadcast of an orchestra, we could follow along on a music score. So that just doesn't, happen these days. And so, I appreciate the luxury of it. But what I didn't realize at the time was that the reason they were teaching us all this was that this was the start of multi-skilling. And what they wanted was people who could come in and fill a gap in the roster anywhere within the organisation. And so even though I wanted to do camera and get out there and do photojournalism, I found myself stuck in a studio most of the time because I had unwittingly been trained. So it took me, a good 5 to 7 years to finally get out on the road doing what I wanted to do. But, now I look back and everything I learned in those 5 years has now served me so well. It's just things that pop up. I mean, all these things that you don't think are going to be of any value and you think are holding you back, that it's just amazing how they resurface.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you do this for 25 years and, on paper, obviously it sounds like an incredible job. And from hearing you, it sounds like you loved what you were doing. And so what was the impetus of starting to even maybe think about leaving that or trying a different career or finally making that leap?
Well, I had what I called the second best job in the world because it was literally they put a plane ticket in one hand, money in the other, kick me out the door and say, go tell people stories. And I went to amazing places, but it was the people that I met that really influenced me. I call them my VIPs, my very inspiring people. And it's those people who got into my head because they were always in front of the camera and they were always affecting change in the world in some way. And I kept on seeing this and I kept on thinking that I want a part of this. And the actual trigger, I remember the exact moment. I was in the United Kingdom and we were filming a program on restorative justice. That's where you put the perpetrators of crime face to face with the victims of crime and you make them own up to take responsibility for what they've created. And we went to a school. It was a tough school. It was called Drayton Comprehensive School. And it had its own policeman. And his name was P.C. Graham Waddington. And he was stationed at the school. And so, this was a tough school. Do you know celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay?
Yes.
Yeah, like he swears a lot and he's a really tough sort of guy.
Yeah.
Okay. He went to school there. So if you imagine a whole school full of 13 to 17-year-old Gordon Ramsays running around, that's what the school was like. Right? So, it was just a tough, lippy, edgy school. So this policeman, P.C. Graham Waddington, he was in a classroom and I was in the back filming and he was talking to this room full of these little 15-year-old Gordon Ramsays about a problem they had in the school, which was substance abuse. The kids were sniffing a lot of aerosols. And from my position in the back of the room, it was just amazing watching him because he wasn't talking at them, he was just talking with them. And the whole tone of this noisy room came down and the kids were hanging on his every word. And then the bell rang and they had their bags in the classroom over there. And all these boys, they just scattered tables and chairs. It was so noisy as they made their way out. And I was the only person who saw this. From the back of the room, 3 kids walked past the desk at the front without saying a word. They reached into their bag and took out a can of aerosol and left it on the desk. And I went, wow, because I had filmed dozens of well-meaning government initiatives that had spent millions of dollars of well-meaning money and hadn't achieved much at all. Yet he was one man standing in front of a room for 20 minutes with a group of 15-year-olds who stopped 3 kids sniffing aerosols that day. And something went off in my head. And I said, I am going to be doing this one day. I don't know how, I don't know where, but I want a piece of this direct action. And that was the point that my whole thinking changed because I thought I was going to be a photojournalist for all my life. I just thought it was the best gig. But I realized, no, I want to metaphorically move from behind the camera to in front of the camera and affect change. But the problem was I had no idea how I was going to do that. And so I just went back to doing what I did, and I started to study the people in front of the camera. And I thought, like success, the secrets are, success leaves clues, and that, secrets are always written between the lines. And so I started to look at them and see if I could see patterns, always look for patterns. And I realized something after a while, that extraordinary people are ordinary people who do extra. These people in front of the camera, it stunned me, because when I did documentary work, it's not like you're with someone, for an hour or so, like if you're doing a news story. You're with people for days and weeks, months, sometimes, repeatedly over years, and you start to see behind the scenes a bit. And it struck me just how average a lot of successful people were. And when I say successful, that's success by any metric, not just money. They were just regular people who found they had a skill, or they were pushed in a certain direction, and they simply turned up more than other people turned up. Woody Allen, he always said that 85% of success is just turning up.
Right.
It's so true. This is what I saw, because we would ask him, can we film you in the morning? And I said, well, you've got to get up early, because I go for a run at 5 o'clock. And then on Tuesday, I do something sport in the morning. Then Wednesday, I do something. How about can we film you, after work? Well, on Wednesday nights, I've got P&C meetings with the local school. Thursday night, I go to some training. But they were always just doing more. And this was both the most liberating and scary news that I'd ever heard in my life, because what it meant was, like Exhibit A, Your Honour, I am the world's most average man. So it meant that I was in with a chance. But it also made me realise that everything up until this point, I had just been making excuses for myself. And so then, like all this idea about personal responsibility, you can talk about it and you can think it, but living it is a different story. So in my mind, I decided that I was going to go and devise a program. This is left field. Here it comes. I was going to go and take a program into schools to teach philanthropy to school children. Now, it's a bit of a long story how I got into the we've been filming documentaries on philanthropy, and I've been asking people, so we might be with the CEO of a large bank or a large corporation, and as we're setting up, I'd go, what do you know about philanthropy? And I go, yeah, look, I'm not really that familiar with it, or I'm going to do something when I retire. And I used to think, that's crazy. You are in a position where you can affect change. You've got authority. You've got your hands on the levers. Do it now. But I realized that, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So that's where I got this idea. Could I teach the next generation of kids coming up this idea about philanthropy, about applying money to a root cause of a problem to see if you can, stave off that problem? And so I walked away from my television career at the top of my game, and I took this program into schools. Now, I had run it past teachers, I'd run it past principals, I'd run it past the government, and they all said, what a worthy idea. So I took this program into schools to deafening silence. And I said, hang on a minute, you said this is worthy. I said, it's a very worthy program. I said, why won't you book it? And they said, you've never asked us that question. That's a conversation we never had. You see, I didn't have a commercial mindset. I thought money grew on trees. I thought, like, if you had a great idea, people will just come to it. Build it and they will come. And I learnt my first lesson about business. Never open a restaurant unless you've got a starving crowd. And so it was a commercial flop. And I pushed it for 18 months. I got it into schools, but it was push. There was no pull at all. And finally, I just had to let it die. So that's when I found myself down and out in the dirt, wasn't earning money, and I had to repackage myself and I had to reinvent myself. Well, the hook that I used to get the kids' attention in the schools was magic, because I had always carried magic in my camera vest with me. The reason for that is, get this, apparently people don't trust the media. Yeah. So, Yeah, shock. And so I always found myself in a position of, like, if I could bring a little bit of magic out, it would relax people. You get them laughing, you get the kids laughing. So it was a good rapport building tool. Used the skills I had there, and I became a magician. And I did that for about 5 years.
Okay, Julian, we got to go back though really quickly because there's so much in that time, because so many people, first of all, would have talked themselves out of even doing the first thing, right? Because if you're at the top of your game, you have a good career and you have a career that you like, I mean, so many of, I think, our audience and the people I talk to are in positions that they're miserable in, and they can't seem to get themselves to leave because of the fear and, what will happen and what if I fail and all this stuff. So to be in a position that you actually like what you're doing, I think it takes so much courage to say, I'm going to try this other thing. Because at the time, if you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you left photojournalism?
Oh, I'm going to tell you. So I'm 58 now, and it was 10 years ago. So late 40s.
Yeah. So, I mean, especially, once we all have these preconceived notions of when it's too old or too late to start over or whatever we like to make up. So, I mean, that being the first hurdle, but then I love, like, one of the reasons I really wanted you on this podcast is 'cause so often a lot of the stories that we have is somebody jumps and then it becomes this massive success, and that's great. But I really want to show that, like, even if you don't hit it out of the park the first time, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't leave. Like, it doesn't mean you shouldn't try and figure out what the next thing is or figure out where your happiness lies. And so a lot of times I think people, when they fail, something that they do fails, they take that as some kind of inherent meaning about them, their self-worth, or what they can do, or see, I'm not good at business, or see, I don't know what I'm doing. I should go back to the thing that I know. So when this didn't go as planned, and, you pushed it for 18 months and you didn't get it off the ground and you learned this lesson, what do you think it was within you that decided, hey, I'm going to try another route of, like, getting in front of children, as opposed to, like, you know what? I'm now 50, and I should just go back and try to get a job in what I know.
So part of it comes back to that I worked out something about myself, and that's my love of learning is greater than my ego. So, I just love learning. I do. I love being in that state where it's almost that state of flow, when you just get in and time passes. And I find that when I'm working on new projects, and it's almost like a drug for me. So, I mean, I have to acknowledge that. But the thing is that to do that, I have to lose all my status. So for all those decades I've worked in TV and got to the top of my game, you build up status. And status is very comforting. It's nice. You can fall back on it. And for me to move to that, a whole new industry, a whole new world where I was a nobody, you have to go back to ground zero and build yourself up again. So just acknowledging that, I mean, I do that my love of learning was actually greater than my fragile inner self. I had to get over that. Also, I've also worked out that change is a process. It's not an event. And for me, it's a 5-year process. And everything I've always done, any change I've wanted in my life, I've always worked in 5-year blocks. And this is counter to what you hear almost all the time now. Like it's 21 days to breaking a habit. It's 3 months to this, and it's not. I mean, I can only argue from my own personal experience. I've studied other people out there as well, but change is a much longer process. And I think of it like a roll of movie film. Like if you're in a cinema and like an old, you think of the old roll of movie film they put on the projector, and that had a story in it, and the story had a start and it had an end, and they would thread the film through the projector gate and on to the other reel. And if you look at every frame, there's 25 frames of those every second, that each frame is just a little bit different to the next, and it's if you play it quickly, it all just looks smooth movement. Well, I reckon, change is like that, is that as it goes through the projector, it goes through the start, right through the end, but it's literally like thousands upon thousands of small, tiny, imperceptible changes. That's what I've got a thing now called the 18-25 rule. And that is that for me to change, so this is not the last change that I've made. I'll change again. And I know that between where I am now and the next thing I want to do is 1,825 little imperceptible changes that I have to make. And I just make one of those a day. And I just keep making one of those a day. And just by almost like osmosis, I become less like my old self and more like my new self. But it's a realistic time frame that I put in place. And then on top of that, you've got to have a supportive partner. I mean, you really do. And my wife went a lot grayer, a lot earlier. So, I have to acknowledge the support that she gave for me. But, each person is different. Each situation is different.
Yeah. I honestly could not love that anymore. I literally want to scream because it's what I've been trying to get across with the podcast or everybody I talk to, because I think you're right. We are sold so much, through marketing, all this stuff of I built a 6-figure business in 6 months and I did this and, it's lose 10 pounds in 30 days. It's these insane things that aren't actually true. And we want that change so badly. And I think we are, I don't know, it's interesting to me because I talk to so many people that are so utterly miserable in their careers. We're talking depressed and on pills and all this stuff. And yet, and I try to, discuss this very idea that this time is going to pass. And yes, it might take more than a year for you to figure out exactly what you want to do and figure out what that's going to look like and take the steps to making that happen. Let's say, and I love that you're putting a time frame of 5 years because it's those 5 years are going to pass. And instead of being in the same position that you are unhappy in, why not start going through that small metamorphosis? But we've just have been, I don't know, taught, or we just want that change so quickly. And we think that if we can't get it, then we'll just stick with what we know because it's too scary. The unknown is too scary. And so it's such a beautiful outlook that you have to really give yourself the space and the time to say, I can become whatever I want to be, but it will be in small incremental changes. It's not going to be this massive overhaul. And within a month, I'm a new person.
And then here's the thing as well. So let's just go back to that movie film analogy. When you look at the film, you see the little frames with each individual frame is different, but next to that you see sprocket holes. And the sprocket holes are there because when it goes through the gate in the projector, little claws come out into the sprocket holes and pull it down one frame at a time. This happens 25 times a second. Do you know what those sprocket holes are? It's self-discipline. And that's what gets you through every day. And people are very confused about willpower and self-discipline. And willpower, because they go, I don't have any willpower. Well, I've got very little willpower as well. Willpower is hard. Willpower is the ability to eat one salted peanut. It's really hard to do. It's this battle. And but self-discipline is completely different. And here's the thing. People don't realize that they're experts in self-discipline. If you drive, every time you go for a drive, there's a dotted line down the middle of the road. Now, when you're driving, you stay on your side of the road. When you drift onto that dotted line, sparks don't fly from the side of your car. It's not like a big imaginary force field that's there that pushes you across. You decided when you got your license, you made a decision that you wanted to live rather than die. And to do that, you were going to exercise discipline and stay on that side of the road. And you have done that all your life. But here's the point. You don't come home and go, oh my goodness, that was so tiring for that driving today. Whoa. No, because self-discipline takes no effort. It's not like willpower. They're two completely different things. And when you start to understand self-discipline, you start to break down the changes that you want over a longer period of time that don't take much effort. And you know how much effort I'm taking? People go, oh, change is hard. No, change is not hard. I'll tell you what hard is. Hard for me, this is my definition of hard, when I lose somebody in my life that I love. That to me is hard. That just tears my guts out. So that's my basis of hard. Little incremental changes, making a phone call to someone, doing something that's a little bit uncomfortable, is a daily dose of mild discomfort. That's all it is. And if you're willing to exercise a little daily dose of mild discomfort, you can go from regret to reward, because regret is where you're going to stay if you've got these ideas that you want to make changes in your life, but you just give into the resistance and you stay ignorant about the things that you need to do. But if you decide that you're just going to become a little bit more aware of what's going on around you and the things you need to learn, and you just put a little dose of daily mild discomfort in there, you end up with reward.
Absolutely. And I think it's that little mindset shift that is responsible for like majority of people's success. But again, I think it goes back to the original underlying acceptance of this belief that it won't happen quickly. It will take a long time, because I think the reason people don't do it or do this small incremental change is because they want massive change quickly. So they think, if I want to lose 10 pounds in a month, it's going to take a lot of really, really uncomfortable days of not eating and working out like a crazy person and doing, things that are going to really be hard to maintain. And so that's why so many people fail at losing weight. But if the thought becomes, okay, I'm going to lose weight over a year, if my goal from the beginning is it's going to take me a year to lose 5 pounds, well, then it's just small incremental changes every day that you can handle. And I will most likely be much more successful taking that route. The problem is, again, we try to truncate everything within 3 months or 6 months. Like, I want to build a business in the next 6 months. That takes willpower, and that takes a lot of pushing and a lot of motivation. And that's why most people burn out. But I think you're absolutely right. The right way of doing it is just small incremental steps. And over time, you will be a new person.
And it's also about that decision, because, change is inevitable, but growth is intentional. And I'm carrying an extra 5 kilos around my waist now. I've been carrying it there for about 5 years. And I don't even try to lose that at the moment, because I haven't made that decision in my head that that's actually what I want to do. And so I don't even bother. But I know there'll just come a point, because I've been on another reinvention for the last couple of years, and it's taking up a lot of my time. But I just know that when I get to the point, I'll wait and just go, no, I want to get back to what I was doing, and I will make that decision. And that's what change is. Change is really that decision. Because once you've really, and it's not just maybe I sort of feel like this. Look, this is another thing that we've got to discuss. This idea about this self-discipline that people don't understand. People talk about feelings. Oh, I don't feel like, I don't feel I can do this. Well, that's what we say to our kids. When we say, kids, clean your room, and they go, oh, I don't feel like it. You go, I don't care what you feel like, just clean the room. And self-discipline is this ability to take the feelings away from the actions that you have to do. And when you understand that it's just a process of change, back to those incremental steps, a little dose of daily mild discomfort, but it's got nothing to do with feelings. So you've got to get away from that language that you use. So it's just all these little things that you put together. It's layer upon layer upon layer.
I love that. And yeah, I think, and one thing you just said that is so key with making a decision, I think a lot of times we just have in the back of our mind all these open loops, all these open things that we, quote unquote, should be doing, or we kind of want to do. Like, I want to lose weight, and I also want to, start a new business, and I want to spend more time with my kids, and I want to, but we don't actually make a decision to do any of them. And I think giving yourself permission to choose one, to say, like, I'm doing this, I'm going to go all in on this business, let's say, for the next 2 years. And not that I'm going to neglect everything else, but that's when I'm consciously making a decision. And giving yourself a little bit permission of not focusing, like you were just saying, like you haven't made the conscious decision to lose some weight. And that's okay. And I think we just constantly think we have to do everything, and then we end up doing nothing. We don't ever make a decision. We don't ever make a plan. We don't set goals. We don't create habits. We don't do anything. And we end up failing across everything, as opposed to saying, okay, like maybe even though I should lose weight, maybe my weight for me right now is not a top priority. And so that's okay. Like, I'm going to focus on this other thing. So I think it's a great way of doing it.
So where do you start? This has been in my mind for the last 5 to 10 years, and I've got a way that people can start. And if you can join me tomorrow on Footpath University, and what Footpath University is that all I ask you to do is trade half an hour to an hour of your time at night in front of the television, and get up half an hour to an hour earlier in the morning. Put on a set of headphones and listen to a podcast like the one we're doing right now, and go for a walk for half an hour to an hour, and do that for 5 days a week. Because that's what I've been doing about the last 3 years. I call it Footpath University, where you get a big mind and a small waistline. So if you're stuck, if you go, I don't know where to start, we have such a wonderful resource we carry around in our smartphone. You've got the world's best educators, the world's best thinkers. You have now 500,000 podcasts out there for you to choose from. And it's all free. And you can start this movement because it's all about, change. It's about decision. It's about momentum. But if you don't know where that is at the moment, then change the influences around you. Because if you listen to the same things that you always listen to and you're stuck in the same patterns and habits, nothing is going to change. So break that habit physically and mentally by doing this. So I'm out there every morning. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, just metaphorically join me on Footpath University.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I think it's great advice. And so why don't you tell us what you're doing now? Because because you've done so much. So you became a magician, putting on thousands of shows. You started a YouTube channel that went to 140,000 subscribers. You have over 30 million views. You started teaching other people how to create these kid entertainment careers. But correct me if I'm wrong, you're not doing that anymore. So how did you, after that robust career that was also hugely successful, you're saying going through another transition. So what are you up to now?
So yeah, just picking up, I'll just put a little bit of detail into that. When I was doing the kids entertaining, the magic shows, I was getting satisfaction making people laugh, but I wanted to affect change. So what I did was I created a program that I took into schools and I taught kids simple little magic tricks, but embedded some character lessons in those. And it was too much for them to learn in one lesson, so I had to make some videos and put them online so they could go back and review the lessons in their own time. I put those on YouTube. Long story short, they became popular. People said, make more. I got that successful YouTube channel. But what happened was I started to look in the metrics, and I got a big surprise. It wasn't just kids watching. It was adults, males, 35 to 55 years old. So I reached out to them and I said, who are you people? What are you watching? And they said, all our lives we've wanted to be professional children's entertainers, but we don't know how to do it. And the tricks that you teach, you don't just teach the tricks, you teach the presentation of them. So I said, if I made something else, what would it be that you want? They said, we want to know how to actually construct a full magic show. Not just the tricks, but the glue in between. How do you do that? So I built this program called How to Build Your Own Magic Show. It became successful, gave me a profile in the world of magic that I never had. I connected up with a guy in the United Kingdom. We formed a company and built the world's first online training academy for professional children's entertainers. And we took people who all their life had harbored this desire to be a professional entertainer, and we took them into being professional entertainers, full-time, part-time, sometime. We taught them all the skills they needed, but underlying was the mindset and the psychology, and that's what I got hooked on. And then about 2.5 years ago, I decided I wanted to take this transformation that people could go through to a wider market. So I sold that online training academy. It still exists. And I went out to repackage these ideas that I could take people from feeling stuck to feeling unstuck. And I ended up stuck myself. And so for about 1.5 years, I was in what I call my fertile void, where I had all these ideas in my head and I was putting out ideas, but I couldn't get any traction in the market. And I was just failing and failing. And then finally somebody slapped me around the head and said, why don't you use this transformation and teach video? Because businesses are struggling to get into the world of video and start to use video. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to do video. I did that for most of my life. You don't understand. I've got bigger ideas and ambitions. So they slapped me around the head again and said, wake up to yourself. Go to market with what you know. And so only about 1 year ago, I repackaged myself and started a program called Get Video Smart, where I work with businesses of all sizes, from small businesses up to large businesses and corporations, and I teach them how to use video in their business to, connect and communicate and convert their customers. So that's what I'm doing now.
I love that. That's wonderful. And it's just like, again, I think that your story is such a testament to the fact that We all have so many different skills, and out of each job that you do, there's a million different branches that you can take, like what you've learned, and repackage it. And it just kind of takes like either, I don't know if you want to call it courage or belief in yourself that you can do it, to put yourself out there. And now in today's day and age with the internet, there are so many ways to create businesses or do the thing that you actually want to be doing. And I just love that you are showing that you can constantly reinvent yourself. You're not stuck in any one position, and you can, go where life takes you.
Yeah, it's interesting because if people ask me what I am, and I don't say this, but this is what I think, is that I'm an encourager. And just look at the etymology of the word there, because N is to put onto, to facilitate, to make something happen. And courage is the quality of mind or spirit that enables a person to face difficulty. So that's just what I've worked out over my life, is that it just takes a little bit of courage. When you break it down into that movie analogy, it's just a bit of mild discomfort. It's not large amounts of courage. And so that's what I do, is that I've worked out that I've been able to make these changes, and I love just working with people, and that's one-on-one or, group sessions, or making videos and putting them online, and encouraging, taking the gift of the courage that I found, and it's like handing it to someone else and going, hey, this worked for me, maybe it'll work for you.
That's wonderful. I love that. And I think that there's a lot of people in this audience that could use a little encouragement. So where can people come and find you if they want to maybe just connect or see what you're doing with video? Maybe you can help their businesses. Where is the best place to find you?
I've just got a one-stop shop. Everything I do is at julianmather.com. That's JulianMather.com.
Wonderful. We will link to that in the show notes in case people can't write it down right now. Julian, I can't thank you enough. This was incredible. I know it's going to help so many people. So thank you for joining us today.
It's been a blast. Thank you.
How many mic drop moments did Julian just have? I mean, honestly, I think you should re-listen to this episode because his advice is gold. But here are my 3 takeaways. 1, you have to adopt a learning mindset. Gone are the days where you could just learn one set of skills and try to stick with that the rest of your life. Things change quickly, and the sooner you are open to the fact that you will consistently have to learn new skills, the more opportunities life will throw at you. 2, you are 100% responsible for your life. This is the toughest one because a lot of times we don't even realize that we're not taking responsibility for our life. So sit and think about when are times that you have given up your agency, where you've maybe felt like you are stuck, and understand that you have the ability to change. You just have to choose to take that responsibility. And 3, change is a process. It's not an event. We are so focused on doing things quickly and having like one snap of a moment that's going to change everything. And it doesn't work like that. If you give yourself the time and space, then all you have to do is make small incremental changes, and that will profoundly change your life. I hope this episode was as helpful to you as it was to me. I will be back next week with a brand new episode. Thank you so much for listening. I can't tell you how much it means to me. If you liked the podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. It'll help other people find the show. If you want to connect or reach out, follow along on Instagram and Facebook at Lessons from a Quitter, and on Twitter at Quitter Podcast. I would love to hear from you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.